Naofumi Iwatani. In his world, he was one of the most legendary chefs in Japan. Someone that can cook up food, had multiple 5-star restaurants, and he did it all. Any type of food, you could have it. Any food from any country, from any city, from any town, he would be able to replicate it with just one taste. But that is one thing that Naofumi would hold on to when he'd go to another world. A world that he didn't know would come true. A world he wasn't sure he could survive. Now, I hope you're ready, because let's find out what happens in What If Naofumi was the legendary cooking hero. Yo, what's good everybody? It's your boy Golden Falls Golden What If, whatever you want to call me, and I'm back with a brand new Shield Hero What If, or, well, I guess at this point is more like brand new Naofumi What If. This is What If Naofumi was the legendary cooking hero. This is a little bit more of a gag what if, I'll definitely say that much. I thought it would have been a fun idea to just mess around and have fun with this two-parter. So if you enjoy, make sure to leave a like, sub, and comment down below any suggestions you have for future what ifs. And yeah, that's about it. And I hope y'all enjoy. And let's get right into the what if. Let's get it. Naofumi Iwatani, the world-renowned chef known all around the world. This man has restaurants everywhere. Countries, cities, towns, you name it, he has one there, serving the most amazing food. American food pales in comparison to this, and when he makes American style food, it's even better than theirs. All he does is create amazing dishes, create the best recipes. And while he was writing down one of his recipes, he begins to feel something very odd. He sees that every time he writes, it seems to just disappear. He gets frustrated knowing that this recipe is perfect. He needs to make sure he gets it down right now. But right before he rewrites it again, the paper begins to glow. Writing begins to appear, but not the writing that he was once putting on that piece of paper. He begins to see various other texts that explained the 4 cardinal heroes: the shield, the sword, the bow, and the spear. But he's confused at why he would be seeing this, but then it flips the page. Somehow his small piece of paper is turning into a book. That book begins to read that the legendary cooking hero took the place of the one with the shield. And he's confused. Cooking hero? That sounds like some war stuff. Why would there be a cook in war? But as he says this, the light begins to expand and covers him entirely, and he appears in a cage-like area. To the left of him, 3 other people. One with a spear, one with a bow, and one with a sword. Naofumi looks down to see that he has what seems to be one of his kitchen knives. Seriously? A kitchen knife? Am I really a cook in this world too? I just get sent here and I have a kitchen knife? Naofumi looks up to see a knight, actually multiple of them, and they begin explaining that the king wants to see them. But the other 3 say that they better have a reward, especially for dragging them here, and especially for the fact that they don't even know where they are. Eventually, they make their acquaintance with the king, and they begin to speak with him. And the king begins to explain the idea of the waves. The waves are basically these series of demonic invasions, and they need help from the 4 heroes. The king does kind of laugh to say that the shield hero isn't here, and it seems he's been replaced by maybe a knife hero? He's not so sure, but he asks if he knows his abilities, and he kind of shrugs, not really knowing much, but he does start looking around his POV or his HUD, and he finds that there is some odd things he can spot. It's very similar to the video games he sees these kids play nowadays, and even his own kids. Naofumi in this, he's definitely on the older side of things, maybe reaching more into his 30s, and he is a chef that basically owns tons and tons of restaurants, so he wouldn't be at a very young age at this point. They introduce everyone introduces themselves to the king, and they're sent off to basically stay the night at a motel or a hotel, a nice room, and then they'll meet up with the king once again, and they'll get to choose or be assigned party members. They do begin to speak, all 4 of them, especially because they're all 4 heroes, and Naofumi asks questions about this whole video game-like world, and says he's not so sure about it. Back in his world, he was a world-renowned chef, not a video game player. He did play some video games when he was younger, something kind of similar to this, but nothing too modern at this point. And they begin to explain everything they know, and they actually ask if he can tell them about his life in its entirety, in which he does. And he says basically all the hardships and everything he's learned, but he does give him some tips about making some money. He is some sort of entrepreneur, you can say, even though he is mostly in the cooking world. And they do begin to find an interest in that maybe that will help them in terms of making money here as well. And he says you never really know, that money is basically transparent through no matter world they're in. Eventually, they do head back to where the king is after the night is over, and when they arrive, partners are assigned, but the cooking hero gets nobody. Naofumi doesn't have one person to help him, but he doesn't really take offense to this. He is, well, basically just a chef. It seems like he just has a cooking knife, and he understands it. He's asked the king if he can get party members outside of all this, well, obviously just the party members they were offered, and he says, of course, that is obviously something he can do. And Naofumi is actually given more money than usual, but Mine doesn't really find a reason to even go into his party, thinking that it's not like he can really be put aside. Nobody really cares about him, so he's just a useless cook. So why would she even try to manipulate him? It's better if she sticks with the spear hero. So that's what she does, and Naofumi heads off to basically get anything he can sorted out, especially with his 2,000 silver. He heads to a nearby blacksmith and begins speaking about trying to get some armor maybe, and that he is one of the heroes, but he's not so sure about his powers. He just has this small knife, and he isn't even sure if he can injure any monsters with it. And the blacksmith is pretty interested and hears that, well, he was the person that is a renowned chef, right? And back in his old world. Yeah, that is me. Would you like some food made for you? If I can have you, help me out from here and there, I'll definitely hook you up. And Earhart says if his cooking is as good as, well, the rumors say, he'll definitely take him up on that. Actually, the first armor of his choice is on the house. So Naofumi picks out some decent armor, puts it on, and promises to bring him some really good grub. He's actually gonna go get some stuff so he can actually begin cooking very soon. And he's gonna analyze his weapon, because a good cook always plans ahead. And Earhart likes the sound of this. So he nods a farewell and actually drops a tip to Earhart of a couple silver pieces and heads out. He goes to the local market, picking out any foods and anything he can even make into food in general, thinking that maybe this world has special bonuses for food. Grabbing anything that could be edible, thinking that maybe if he creates it properly, he can give them special effects. But he's not too sure about that, so he grabs anything he can and he absorbs it into his weapon. It seems like his weapon has some sort of infinite storage of some sorts, and he can just take out, well, any food he wants. He tries to put other items in there, but it seems like it actually doesn't work. It's only food. Raw meat, stuff like that, it seems like all that would work. He heads out into the wilderness, at least after grabbing all the stuff he needs and spending a good pretty penny on all of the stuff he wants. He believes that quality is definitely going to be better than quantity, but he'll find that balance sooner or later, especially in this world. And what he does realize is that when he gets these ingredients, the quality of ingredients already skyrockets. So maybe it would be a good idea just to bulk a bunch of things and then get it up to medium to high grade quality, maybe throughout his leveling. He isn't so sure, but he does need to find the benefits of using his cooking in a world that is full of monsters. So he goes out into a secluded place, nothing crazy, there's no monsters around, and he begins tinkering with his weapon, and he looks to find that there is a cooking mode. He's not so sure how this would work. Maybe it's going to put a table in front of him of some sorts, but immediately when he clicks it, it makes an entire kitchen around him. He's actually shocked to see this. It's very similar to the one that he has in his own world, but it's a little busted and run down, and he hypothesizes that when he starts leveling up, the kitchen probably gets upgraded easily, giving him tons and tons of more perks. And he actually thinks that there's actually really no reason for him to have motel rooms either, so that's actually perfect. They can just set up shop in the kitchen, and he's sure that he can get some nice futons and beds going pretty well, pretty easily. So that's a good idea for him to do. But he begins making food. He starts out with some simple stuff, some of his favorite cuisine, obviously some sushi, some ramen, and other things like that. And he begins to see that there are stat buffs to them. It seems that sushi gives him a stat buff to agility, ramen a stat buff to actually speed. But it seems odd. Maybe these stat buffs can be combined depending on certain ingredients. So he starts combining ingredient after ingredient, finding that various ingredients up certain levels or up certain stats. So he does find this to be interesting, and the more it could be more potent depending on the food. So he tries to find the best possible foods. But he also does want to find a food that maybe just ups his level. Maybe it will give him experience. And he begins to brainstorm. Now, what food would give me experience? What food? Maybe even experience booster. Something full of energy. Maybe even quick energy? He thinks that maybe sugary treats will give him that. So he begins baking something, and the baking process is 1,000 times quicker than he's ever seen before in his life. When he bakes cakes and stuff like that, it takes forever. But this is like instantaneous. He puts something in the oven, it's done immediately. He frosts it up and makes it perfect the way he wants it, cuts a slice and looks at it, and he sees that the whole cake will give him experience points. Partial pieces of the cake will give him partial experience points. Oh, now this is good. If I eat the cake, then I'll get a ton of experience. Now that is interesting. But there's probably benefits as well and downsides to the cake. He looks more in depth and sees that there is downsides. Obviously, this is gonna give him a lack of energy in the beginning. And it seems like the XP growth will definitely help, but it's like the cake is doing the opposite of what it would do in the real world. The cake would give him XP, but it's gonna make him crash way in the very beginning. Compared to in real world, if you ate a bunch of cake, you'd be high on sugar more or less for the beginning, and then you would crash. In this case, you would get the benefits, but then immediately have the downsides. So he tries to brainstorm. Maybe he can find a nice sugary treat that isn't as big as a cake, and maybe get something simpler. He does make something. He makes a small gingerbread man from some of the ingredients he has, seeing that it has a pretty good experience gain, but not too much of a sluggish return, and he eats it. And he sees that his levels go from level 1 to level 5 immediately. He's shocked to see this and begins to think that obviously XP most likely will scale, so it's gonna be on a really bad incline, so he won't be able to get 5 levels every time he eats a gingerbread cookie or anything. But this is beneficial. He goes on a tear, making food after food, meal after meal, anything he could think of, from drinks to solids to anything, to soups. Anything he can think of that is in his repertoire, he makes it, puts it in his weapon, and keeps it for later. He actually tests this out. He looks to see if there's an expiration date, maybe a timer, and it says infinity on all of them. It seems like no matter what, these things will not spoil as long as he has it in his weapon. He cooks through his entire batch of ingredients he has that he bought, and he thinks that this was damn well worth it. He has all this food for one to either sell, make a ton of money from it, use for his own personal gain so that he can be stronger and maybe even gain experience points, and then eventually when he gets party members, he can keep them fed and also give them experience points and boost to their stats, even if it's temporary, because some are of a temporary boost, but others are permanent. Could be permanent minor strength boosts or even permanent minor agility boosts. After basically finishing up in the kitchen, he actually heads back into the markets to see if anybody's still open, finding that nobody actually is. But while he does this, someone comes up from behind him saying that he's really the only market currently in business at this hour, and it's the slave market owner. And he introduces himself to Naofumi, saying that if he wants a party member, he can give him one, actually one that won't disobey at all. Naofumi is confused at this for a second, but then follows the man in to see that he has a ton of slaves. Naofumi doesn't know how to feel about this, especially because he's morally okay right now, and he doesn't really want to have the burden of a slave upon him. But he does say, or the slave market owner does say, that a slave would be pretty beneficial. So Naofumi caves in a bit and decides to check it out. He gets introduced to a high-level wolf monster, but Naofumi says that he obviously knows that he can't afford that. And he says, of course, that they have much cheaper options as well. And that's when Naofumi comes across a little girl by the name of Raftalia, a girl with raccoon ears and a raccoon tail. And Naofumi says that he'll take her. He'll make sure that she's okay and basically get her back up to health. And he's surprised to hear this. The slave market owner says that Naofumi seems to be a very righteous man and someone that is very caring, and that their little relationship here will go a long way. And Naofumi ends up buying Raftalia, giving the slave market owner a little bit extra, and he takes her away. He promises her that he's not gonna do anything bad and that she'll be okay, and that they're actually gonna head to his little kitchen of some sorts, and that she needs some food in her pretty quickly, and he actually has some food that would cure her of her mild cold. And he does just that, giving her some food, curing her of her mild cold, and she's grateful to see this. But he sits down next to her, explaining that he's not so sure if he can fight on his own. He's one of the heroes, the legendary heroes. Supposedly he replaced the shield hero. He's not so sure about that though. And she's shocked to hear that he replaced the shield hero, and she's confused about this. The shield hero? Why would you replace the shield hero? And he says he didn't do it by choice. He'd love to have him here. He's heard, well, not the best things about him. Supposedly everybody hates him, but he's sure that the guy was a good person at heart. And Raftalia nods, saying that she's heard stories that the shield hero saved so many people and saved her own kind. And Naofumi is shocked to hear this and realizes that there's something going on, especially in Melremark. But even with that thought, he says that he kind of needs Raftalia to help him out. So he's going to get her a weapon and some nice armor, and they're going to hopefully be able to train together. And that he has a large assortment of ranges of food for her to try, and that they're going to give her a slight boost in her strength and all the other stats. And she's psyched to hear this, that she gets to try this food, and that all his food must taste so good. And Naofumi kind of smiles and says that he's been cooking for a very long time, so he would hope so. But with all that said, they both go to sleep, getting small little futons in the kitchen area, and when he wakes up, the kitchen actually has changed, grown to be bigger, and it seems like it's morphing into some sort of house. And when they leave, it seems like the kitchen is gone immediately. It's like everything disappears. It's like some cloak of some sorts, but he's not gonna think too much about it. They head over to Earhart to get that weaponry for her, and obviously the armor, and once they do, they go to head out to get some training done, in which Raftalia is easily able to defeat these small balloon animals, in which she's definitely out of her sickness and has a good bit of confidence because of Naofumi. But that next challenge would definitely come when she would try to kill this rabbit that would spew blood, and she really hates blood. But through some nice talking and some genuine responses, Naofumi is able to get her to kill that rabbit. During their small journey, he does come across a village called Loot Village, a village that, well, Earhart actually brought up previously, saying that it would be decent to go there to get some money. So Naofumi actually goes around selling some of his food, and they pay a pretty penny for that, racking up a good amount of cash. But on top of that, he gets information about these, well, wild beasts in the cave over there, and that they should be slain. And Naofumi says that he can handle it with Raftalia, and that they'll see what they can do. So they head over, and Naofumi eats some of his gingerbread and his candy, to gain some extra levels, getting him to about a level 12, and Raftalia currently at a level of 10. Naofumi had already a jump start on her, but since Raftalia can actually kill things way easier than Naofumi ever would, she is definitely on her way to catch up. They head to this mine they have heard about, and they decide that they're gonna go search for any monsters they possibly can find, but they run into trouble sooner than they possibly could have imagined. There's a dog monster, a two-headed one that Raftalia begins to freak out about, and Naofumi realizes that there's not much they can do. They can't get out. They don't have any food that would be able to make him strong enough to even keep up with this monster. It's too high of a level. He goes to guard Raftalia and tells her to run away, and she tells him no, that he'll die, and he shakes his head and says that's fine, as long as she's safe. She doesn't even budge an inch though. The two-headed monster jumps toward them and begins to walk toward Naofumi, and he goes to basically defend himself. But as the dog walks up, it begins to tilt its head and begins to walk up and then sit down right in front of Naofumi. What? It begins to smell Naofumi's knife, and Naofumi's slightly confused but starts taking food out. One after another, the dog shakes his head no until he gets to this marinated steak that he made before. The dog begins to nod, and Naofumi throws it toward him, and he eats the food, and he begins to jump around in joy. Naofumi is very confused by this, but sees in the top left of his corner that it says that the dog has entered his party, and asks if he wants to basically name this new monster that has joined him. And he's shocked to see this, and he decides that he's just gonna call it, maybe Rover would be a good name. And he asks the dog, how does that sound? And the dog licks him on the face. See, Raftalia, the dog isn't that bad, right? He's a nice puppy. Raftalia goes over, and immediately Rover allows Raftalia to pet him. This actually helps Raftalia get over her fear of this dog monster and makes it seem as if it's so peaceful and calm. And now with this dog monster, it is a perfect time for them to train. It's actually amazing. Having the dog monster on his side, or Rover on his side with Raftalia, makes leveling up so much easier. Throughout the entire month, they level up on monster after monster and train after train. And even Naofumi gets enough money to get a custom order for, well, Rover, getting him some nice armor and some specialized claws and other things like that, and even his teeth sharpened for the next wave. After the entire month, Raftalia has rapidly matured, and Rover has grown quite a bit, making it so that he actually has 3 heads instead of 2. It seems kind of wild, but the dog is pretty darn strong. At a level of 35, Raftalia at a level of 25, and Naofumi at a level of 21. Being that they are a pretty darn strong party, they're ready for this next wave to occur. During their trip to the Hourglass, the other 3 heroes actually meet Naofumi and actually are introduced to his new party, saying that it's pretty interesting that he has a monster and a girl in his party as well, and he actually explains right off the bat that he actually saved her from a slave market, and that she's been helping him in training and all the other stuff throughout this entire time, and he makes sure that she's well fed and everything is good in her life. She nods, saying that her previous life was absolutely horrible, and Naofumi helps take care of her so much now, and it's like he's like an amazing person. And 2 of the heroes say that that's pretty good actually, and they should look into trying to free some slaves themselves. But Motoyasu, this sits differently with him, and especially when Mine begins to tell him that that is just wrong. A hero shouldn't have a slave in his party, and that she begins to manipulate him, but this will come into play a little bit later. After some time passes, the first wave then finally begins, and they head over to Loot Village to try their best to protect it, in which they can relatively easily. Naofumi eats some of his strength and agility like temporary boost foods, and he begins to fend off the monsters as well. He's not as strong as Raftalia and definitely not Rover, but he's definitely able to somewhat keep up with the monsters and help defend Loot Village with relative ease. But what he sees is kinda odd. He sees a monster jump in the air from the distance, and he begins to have an idea. he started making these odd looking foods for monsters. He believes that there's some sort of kibbles, and with the right ingredients, it can have insane effectiveness on these monsters. So he heads over to the main boss asking if Rover and Raphtalia can handle this for now, and they say of course, that it's actually been pretty easy. So he heads over, seeing the Chimera, and everybody keeps striking at the Chimera, and it looks like they're about to finish it off, but Naofumi tells him to stop. The Chimera looks at Naofumi and goes to jump on him, but then stops as well. He pulls out a kibble, and the Chimera tilts his head, just like, a cat and a dog would, getting surprised and intrigued by the food that Naofumi has in front of it. It runs over to Naofumi, sitting down, and Naofumi feeds it. And once Naofumi feeds it, the wave begins to disappear. It's as if he beat the boss with food. The other three of them are confused to see this and say that that's pretty unique. The fact that he just beat the main boss by taming it. It's as if he doesn't have to kill the monsters, he can just tame them in a way. He shrugs his shoulders, saying that this probably wouldn't work on all the monsters. He is definitely more of a cooking hero compared to a taming hero, but it definitely benefits them in the long run. Especially the fact that Naofumi isn't really that strong himself, but now he can get other monsters to be strong. He has that dog monster, or Rover, over there that's extremely strong. He gets Raphtalia pretty strong, but she's more like a human. And then now he has this Chimera. The Chimera jumps in joy and looks at the other heroes and kind of growls at them. He pats the Chimera on the head and says that they'll figure out a name, and that he's sure Raphtalia would want to name him this time, and says to not worry about the other three heroes, that they're nice people. Or at least that's what Naofumi thinks. So he walks away, and Itsuki and Ren are kind of impressed by this, and Motoyasu just sees it as him taking advantage of another monster or another being. And they say that's just not true. They were gonna kill that being, so why does it even matter? They question why he would even think like that, but he just shrugs it off and leaves. And now Naofumi has Rover, the Chimera, and Raphtalia in his party. With the wave now completely repelled, it's time for him to head off. They're actually invited to a hero's state dinner, and Naofumi actually decides to attend, but he's very critical of the food. So frankly, Raphtalia and the rest of his party just eat the food he's made. All of it kind of sucks. And he makes way better food than that, and Raphtalia even says so, that the food over here is just horrible. Yeah, it's better than what she was eating when she was imprisoned and enslaved, but this food compared to his is terrible. And he agrees, it's not very good. But he kind of just says that not everybody can be a professional cook, and if they want to bulk in terms of food, they gotta cut some corners, so it's understandable. But with that said, Naofumi just continues talking and actually hangs out with his monsters, but frankly they don't fit very well in there, so everybody kind of pushes the party to the side and they kind of just hang out in their own section because, well, they don't have any shrunk forms or anything like that, unfortunately. But nonetheless, they have a decent time. That's until Motoyasu steps up and tries to challenge Naofumi, saying that he wants to fight for the freedom of, Raphtalia. And Naofumi says that sounds ridiculous, that Naofumi actually got the slave crest off of her a long time ago, and she chooses to stay here now. He doesn't understand the whole point of that. And Motoyasu says that that's just not true. He must have something in his food that he gives Raphtalia to make her stay. And that even was brought to his attention by his loyal partners. And Naofumi says that this is ridiculous, that he can't really even fight on his own, so why would he fight somebody in a duel? It makes no sense at all. And he says that he won't take no for an answer, and Naofumi just goes to leave. And when Motoyasu tries to stop him, his Chimera immediately pushes him away, basically growling at Motoyasu, and Raphtalia tells him to calm down. It's okay, Milo, don't worry about the mean person, he just doesn't understand. So the Chimera, or Milo, calms down and begins to leave with Naofumi, Raphtalia, Rover, and when they head out, nobody even tries to stop them, especially because Naofumi has some really scary monsters on his team. I mean, who would even stand in front of that? Nobody would. So he leaves without a trace, and the other two heroes agree that it doesn't make sense for him to fight for one of his party members when she's not even technically a slave, and that he treats her really well. So what's the point? And they even point at Mine, saying that he should not agree with just everything she says for the sake of agreeing, that he needs to think for himself sometimes. They definitely accuse Motoyasu of being slightly incompetent, but they don't say that outright. But with the other party, Naofumi's party, they head off and begin to head to Loot Village once again, and they stay there for a while, but Naofumi has an idea. Maybe they should get another monster from the slave merchant. Maybe that's a good idea. They could even get something that's more tame, controlled. Of course, he pats the other two monsters on their head, the Chimera and the three-headed dog now. Pats them on the head and saying that, of course, they're tame. But if they get one that's already tame from the beginning, the leveling process will be easy to get them leveled up. So Naofumi goes over with an extensive amount of money, planning to spend a decent amount, but Raphtalia even says that it's probably not the best idea for them to spend too much. But when they arrive, a good alternative shows up. These gacha eggs are introduced to them, and he decides to buy one, and says that he'll hatch it and see what it comes to be, and if it's a Fallolial, it can definitely join the party as a way of travel of some sorts. They take the Fallolial egg to Loot Village, and it hatches relatively quickly, and the food that Naofumi gives it makes it into a grown Fallolial really fast, and also it sparks up its levels to almost on par with Raphtalia and over Naofumi himself immediately. He's shocked to see this, but does realize she has a slave crest on, and asks the Fallolial if she wants the slave crest off, that they always could, and he's sure that she'll behave. And the Fallolial says that, basically shakes her head and says that it doesn't matter. Doesn't normally necessarily say it out loud, but obviously the shaking of a head means that they don't care. So with that said, they begin to roam around Loot Village until they hear tons of people approaching. It's Motoyasu and Mine with a bunch of royal guards. Naofumi and his party approaches them, and he hops on his Fallolial and he questions why they're even here. And they say that they're gonna take Loot Village over the rule for Motoyasu, but they're gonna charge some insane taxes. And Naofumi says that is not gonna happen. That it cannot happen, that they are too cheap in Loot Village. The rooms to stay here and the food to eat, they're so cheap. They can't be doing that. That's just not gonna work. And he's been supplying Loot Village with a good amount of food recently, and they've paid him some payments, but he's taken basically the bare minimum. He's sold to other places and got a pretty penny, but to them, they're like more or less like family. This town is a good town for him, and he wants it to stay that way. He says that this royal decree will not go through. And Mine says that he doesn't have a choice in this, but just as she says this, a shadow appears, basically from the queen, giving her something. This frustrates Mine and says that if he wants to protect the village so bad, that Motoyasu will challenge him to a race 3 laps around the village, in which Naofumi says that's fine. He hops on top of his Chimera, or Milo, and says that he's ready. And they begin to line up, and let's just say this is far easier than normal. Philo's kind of mad that she isn't allowed to race herself, but she kind of shrugs, knowing that Milo will easily win this just with no problem and sweat at all. Milo, even with the magical powers that are being struck upon him, potholes and stuff like that, it's not even close. He beats him by multiple laps, and they're obviously deemed the winners. And Mine says that he cheated, obviously, but even the shadow appears once again, saying the only person that cheated was Mine, and that she needs to get out of here right now, because they lost fair and square. So they're forced out, and Loot Village is saved. They thank Naofumi and his party, and they all pet obviously the monsters, and just as someone goes to pet Philo, she grows in size. Whoa, I didn't know Fallolials could do that. Raphtalia says the same thing, that she had no clue, but this kind of works out. Now they don't have to have Milo just pushing a cart. Maybe they can have Philo and Milo, or maybe just Philo, since she might have some hovering or flying type of capabilities. And Philo says that she basically loves pulling the cart by just jumping around and pointing at the cart with her little feathers. So she takes the cart and they all head off. Obviously, the other monsters have to walk on foot, and most of them are actually sent ahead to scout out to make sure everything is safe. But weirdly enough, when they set up shop once again, when Naofumi wakes up, Philo is a little girl. It seems that Philo has transformed even further, and he looks back at his other monsters and wonders if they can do that too. And maybe it's because of the slave crest, and that's why it happened so fast in terms of Philo. And he says that he's not going to think about that, at least not right now, but he'll have to definitely think about it if it happens later on. So they decide they're going to take her to Earhart, and when they do, he says that, well, he can't do anything about it. He has no magical thread, he can't make her magical clothing, so he sends him to the dressmaker, in which she says that she doesn't have any magical thread. So they go to the magic owner, or the magic shop owner, in which they say that she needs this gemstone for her loom to actually make that thread. So that's what their next mission is. They head off to go find that loom, or the magical gemstone actually. But during this drive, or during this journey, they find a wealthy trader, and he asks if he can be picked up and taken away, and Naofumi is fine with it as long as he can provide with some assistance as well, and he says that he can definitely give that insider knowledge in terms of being a trader and some contacts to Naofumi, and Naofumi says that sounds good to him, and they begin to leave. A bandit group does intend to attack the wagon. Yeah, that's until they see the monsters, and they kind of chicken out immediately, and even the quote-unquote stronger person that they have immediately runs away. They are terrified. There's a giant dog with 3 heads, a chimera, and they're just petting it. And then they have a giant philolial? What is that thing? So they're terrified, so they decide to leave and not even mess with them. So when they arrive, the trader thanks Naofumi, teaches him some new skills, introduces him to new contacts, and even gains him a warrant to the mine at the quarry at a discount. With all that said, Naofumi's party heads in to find that magical gemstone, in which they find this alchemist tomb housing a cursed seed. Unfortunately, that seed is gone, and Naofumi is a little uneasy about that fact. But nonetheless, they have to keep heading in. They finish off these monsters that are trying to trick them with this weird noises, and Milo is easily able to kill them like it's nothing before they can even do much damage, and eventually they find the new who made a nest in this gem vein. Immediately Milo walks up to the new and goes over. Wait, no, Milo, no, don't, no, Milo, no. As Milo walks over, Milo just completely bites the new's head off, and Naofumi just looks away as Milo shows the decapitated head. Yeah, good job, Milo. I could have tamed that thing, probably. That's fine. Milo then begins to spark with electricity after eating the being, and shows that there's the gems right behind him. It seems like Milo actually gained the powers from the new, and Naofumi even looks to see that it somehow breached the 40 level cap. It seems like Milo is at a level of 50 now, maybe expanding the cap? And Naofumi does take intrigue to this, thinking that their party will be at most likely a cap of level 40 pretty soon, especially obviously Rover. But now that Milo has surpassed it, maybe he can raise the level cap himself, maybe even make the class upgrade more potent using some food. He's not so sure, but it's definitely a theory he wants to try out. With all that said and done though, they head back, make the thread, easy as that, and now Philo has a beautiful dress. Now with that done, they begin to head out, and they're tasked by the trader once again to deliver something, to deliver a herbicide to a village. When they arrive, they see tons and tons of monstrous plants. They have just overrun the village entirely, and they go to see what's going on, and the villagers say that this seed from the tomb of something, the spear hero took it and tried to end their local famine, in which it worked for a little bit, but now it sprouted into a giant plant and started killing people, attacking them. And they're so worried, they beg Naofumi, please, can you stop it, please? And Naofumi begins to say that he probably can. He'll send his two other monsters out there. He'll send Milo and Rover to at least try to herd the monstrous plants the best they possibly can, and then he'll go out and try to get a cure using this herbicide. They thank him profusely, and he begins making a cure via his cooking skills. He uses the mix of the herbicide in his weapon, and then the mix of various other ingredients, and he makes something that for the monstrous plant. It's something very interesting. He takes it to the monstrous plant and basically gets Raphtalia and Philo to close the distance, and he makes the monstrous plant eat it. And once the monstrous plant does so, it begins to shrink in size, and Naofumi puts something on the ground, a tiny little cup and full of dirt, and he basically captures this monstrous plant. And when he does so, the monstrous plant is actually a level of 1, and it says that it's in his party. Now see, that's not what I thought would happen, but I guess I'll take it. He even explains to Raphtalia and Philo that it seems like the monstrous plant has kind of been tamed, but he's not sure what he can actually do with it. I mean, especially because it's kind of just a plant. And they decide that they're going to put it in the carriage for now, and maybe it can be tame or something will happen with it, but they're not so sure. They head back up to the village, and they begin telling them that they took care of it, and show them even the little cup. They're shocked to see it, that Naofumi was able to do that. They thank him and ask if he needs anything, and he says that's not the case. But he does want to get their opinion on some new food, so he gives them some new foods and stuff like that to try, and they thank him so much, and they say that he's such a good chef and a cook. It's so amazing. And he thanks them for the compliments, but he just wants to spread the food around the best he possibly can. He actually has a bag of seeds for them as well, so hopefully they can get the growth process on regular plants back and up and running. They thank him again, and he heads off. And they are tasked with another merchandise sale, and they have to head to a hot spring in which they stay the night, relaxing in the hot spring with the monsters, Philo, Raphtalia, Milo, and Rover. It's a nice time. And then obviously the little plant monster right next to them just hanging out, chilling. And after that night, they begin to hear rumors spread. It seems like a mysterious disease is spreading through a village nearby, so Naofumi decides to go investigate, finding out that supposedly a dragon is decaying on the top of the mountain. Ren, the sword hero, killed it but left the body there, so it's rotting. So he tries to cure any of their diseases using various foods that he's found out, and he gives them anything that he possibly can, and it makes them feel a lot better, in which they thank him, but he says that he shouldn't be thanked quite yet. They're not actually cured of the disease, so he's gonna go up and dispose of it. He has some good monsters for that, so it should work out pretty well. They decide to take the cart up as well, and stopping there. They leave the little plant monster, especially because it's level 1. He doesn't want it to get hurt. So he tells the plant to not make a move, but it's not like a plant can move anyways. But they head up to see the dragon. Wow, this is definitely something else. We gotta get rid of it. You up for it, Milo? How about you, Rover? They both howl and get ready to basically get rid of it, but as they walk up to be rid of the entire dragon, the dragon comes to life. Naofumi is shocked to see this, and he basically tells Raphtalia and Philo to take cover, but Philo basically activates her more Philolio Queen form, her giant form, and begins to attack the dragon as well as on top of Rover and Milo. They begin fighting, and Raphtalia enters the fray as well, and Naofumi gets kind of frustrated because he can't really help very much. And then out of nowhere, he feels a slight tap on his shoulder. Huh? He turns, and nothing's there. He turns the other shoulder, and nothing's there as well. He turns around completely, and he doesn't see anybody. But what he does see is he sees vines. Tons of vines. These vines begin to spread and begin to cover the dragon. He's shocked to see this. Oh no, what's gonna happen? If this plant devours that dragon, will it turn mad again? He's not sure, but as the dragon begins to get engulfed in this plant, the plant begins to absorb the dragon, getting rid of it entirely, but as a last-ditch effort, the dragon breathes fire on the plant, burning a good bit of it, but it just regenerates back. Naofumi is shocked to see this. It's just level 1. How is it even? He looks at the stat sheet and it says that it's already a whopping level 40. He's insane to see this. He's not sure how this even happened, but it must have had something to do with his herbicide mixed type of food that he gave the monster to kind of make it shrink back down. Immediately the dragon is just absorbed into the plant, and the plant just recedes right back into the cup. Naofumi goes to check it out and nothing even happened. He looks at the plant and the plant begins to grow slightly and taps Naofumi on the face, basically to say that everything is fine. And he's shocked to see this. He has a plant. He has this Milo, which is a chimera. He has a 3-headed dog that totally could have more heads, which is a scary idea. He has a giant Philolial, and he has a half raccoon, half person. This is definitely an interesting party. But with that said, luckily the dragon is handled. He's surprised that it only took a plant to get rid of it, but he's happy to see this, and especially because they got tons of XP from this. Naofumi at a level of 35 at this point, Raftalia at 40, the 3-headed dog, or Rover, at 40 as well, and obviously the Chimera Milo at 60. He broke through that chain of leveling somehow because he devoured that new and even gained himself some new abilities. Their party is pretty well balanced, and Naofumi believes that it's time to maybe that they should head back toward the capital. Maybe they can give them some class upgrades and he can actually figure out how this whole class upgrade system works. With his whole party at 40 or higher, he heads back. He begins to head back and Philo spots somebody running out to her, and Naofumi's confused. He goes out to see a girl by the name of Melty, a blue-haired girl that loves Philolials. And she asks if they could basically accompany her to the capital, and that she doesn't really know her way back. And of course Philo says yes, and Naofumi just smiles, shaking his head, and says as long as she likes to pet monsters, that there's no problem at all. She runs over to the Chimera, hugging it, and seeing that it's very friendly, as well as everybody else is very friendly. So they take Melty eventually back to the capital, and their goal is actually to get some class upgrades. But when they arrive, it seems like they're refused. He's trying to say that doesn't make sense, that they should be allowed to get their class upgrades, but that's just not the case. But he analyzes the Dragon Hourglass a little bit and wants to basically make some food. Maybe he can make a type of food that would allow them to go over the level cap just a little bit, at least giving them a boost in XP until they can get to that next place. But as they leave the Dragon Hourglass, Naofumi is actually attacked by Motoyasu. Motoyasu goes to strike him, but immediately his Chimera, or Milo, swats Motoyasu out of the sky. He immediately pins him down and looks to Naofumi, basically as a way of saying, would you like me to kill him or not? And Naofumi shakes his head. Don't kill him, Milo. It's okay. He brings Milo over, and Motoyasu says that it's not okay, that Philo is another slave, that he's enslaving these creatures, but Philo says that that's just not the case, and that he should not attack Master Naofumi, ever. And she kicks him in the nuts, basically sending him flying while in her giant Philolial form. Naofumi laughs really hard about this and just shakes his head, and Melty comes over and apologizes for the trouble, and she's with a couple knights. Naofumi's confused by this, but she explains something, that she personally is the second princess and that she's the heir apparent to the throne when the queen passes on. But her older sister Malty, or what you know as Mine, was going to be that heir apparent, but since she's so toxic, she's actually not allowed to be. And hearing this, Naofumi is not surprised. He says that it kind of makes sense, and Melty does seem a bit more proper than her, and thanks her for the, well, you could call it hospitality. And Melty says that, of course, that a true hero like himself deserves that hospitality, but these other ones, like Motoyasu, she thinks otherwise. Now with that handled, and Melty being in the good graces of Naofumi 100%, he heads over to Earhart to get some upgrades for his team, especially because it keeps expanding. He gets them all new upgrades. He's not able to really get a new upgrade for his little plant guy, but he decides that he'll give him some nice special water or some special food that his plant can eat. Now, with some time left before the wave, Naofumi wants to scout out some towns, finding some refugees though, and he finds that they're starving, begging for food, and he gives them plenty of food, making sure they're all well fed, and even gives them some seeds to actually be self-sufficient, and asks what even happened, and they say that Itsuki, he basically started a revolution, but it just made everything just as bad not too long after, and Naofumi is frustrated to hear this. He heads back into the city before the next wave, and he encounters Ren and Itsuki. They ask him, actually politely around this time, if he's been taking their rewards, and he actually explains that he only took them because they actually didn't finish the job. Ren asks what does he mean by it, but he explains very quickly. He says that the dragon that he defeated, yes, he defeated it, but he didn't dispose of it. He needs to dispose of it so that it doesn't plague the other village, and that's what happened. And Itsuki asked what happened with him, and he said that he started a revolution, yes, but he just put another dictator into power, so it's just as bad. Or worse, they're fleeing for their lives and sacrificing their starvation for it. And they didn't realize that it was this bad, so they were like, basically say that they'll make sure to pay more attention, definitely in the future. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I'm sorry that I took your rewards. I mean, I don't really need it. Here. He tosses them some extra money, and they say that that's not even the amount they were going to be given, that's way more, and he says that he's fine on money and to not worry about it. So he heads off and says that he needs to be ready for the next wave, especially with only 24 hours left. During this time, his party just rests, and he actually starts brewing something up, or really, making something. He makes these sweet tarts. He's not sure exactly how they work, but it seems like it makes their level cap +5 once they eat them one time. But they're only allowed to eat it one time, so he gives it one to Raftalia, one to Philo, one to Rover, and then one to his plant, but he doesn't know how he's going to eat it, and that's until the plant basically covers it and just swallows it whole, and he just shrugs his shoulders. Knowing now they have 5 more levels to grow, he basically tells them that they should basically wait on him to get some more XP boosting foods, and that they can get them capped off at least the rest of the way. So he does just that. Being that Raftalia now at a level 45, Philo at a level 45, his plant monster and Rover at level 45, and then obviously his Chimera or Milo at a level of 60. With some more time left, he actually makes himself some foods to raise his XP, but it seems like it's harder to raise his own XP compared to others, so he's able to get to around the same level as them from 45 to 47, but he had to use a ton of his ingredients, saying that he definitely needs to restock after this wave, but it seems like they're definitely ready for the wave to come. The wave then arrives. They're at Loot Village, and they begin to protect it with all of their might, and it's relatively easy actually. There's really no challenge in defending Loot Village, and he leaves it off to the rest of the people that are there to defend it, because after 3 hours of defending, nothing has happened. The wave is still going on, and he's confused at what's occurring. So he takes his party up to where the main boss is, finding that the heroes are arguing. He yells at them, telling them to stop arguing, that they need to work together to make sure everything goes according to plan. He points something out. He throws his knife at a shadow and retracts it back to his hand, and the shadow begins to expel a soul eater. See, that's the main boss. Stop being idiots. Immediately, Raftalia goes after the soul eater, slicing at it. She personally isn't able to kill it immediately, but with the help of the rest of his party, and also Milo, it is super easy to kill the first soul eater. But when the second one comes out, everybody is shocked. But Naofumi decides that he actually wants to see if he can tame it. So he walks over with some kibble and thinking that maybe this would work, but as he reaches out to give it to him, the soul eater tries to bite his head off. He rolls out of the way, and the rest of them are basically telling him to stop messing around. Even his party say that that was way too dangerous, that he should not have tried to do that, and he just shrugs. But as he's about to tell them to finish that one off as well, something else kills it. A blast from the sky, and someone floats down on the corpse of the Soul Eater. It's a woman in a black kimono wielding 2 bladed war fans. The true enemy of this wave has just appeared to them. Glass easily defeats the other 3 heroes' parties and challenges Naofumi. Naofumi says that he technically can't fight for himself and that he does some other manners of trying to defeat people. He has his party, he has his food, and that's about it. But he does have this. He flicks something into the air, and Raftalia says that they can handle it, that he shouldn't resort to that, but he says that he just wants to try it out anyways. It's a food pill, something very odd. Glass is confused to see this, and he says that the only way he can really beat her, at least on his own, is if he eats this. But the only thing is, if she eats it, she'll die, so don't get any ideas. The rest of his party stand by his side, and he pops it in his mouth. He swallows it, and it immediately skyrockets his leveling to twice the amount. He goes from a level of 45 to a level of 90. His body flares up in strength, and his knife grows like a machete. And he looks at it, and now Naofumi has entered a new state. It's called the Butcher State. Naofumi begins his assault on Glass, and Glass can't really keep up, especially with the help of his monsters. She begins to panic and tries everything in her disposal to get away, and eventually she's able to escape into the wave. The fight was quick, but Naofumi could tell that without that food pill, even his party would have struggled a lot against Glass. He realizes that they really need their class upgrades, a full class upgrade. His food won't cut it, and they need to get stronger, because if he relies on this food pill too much, it's definitely going to have some after effects. The food pill forcibly wears off because the wave is now gone, and there's no reason to be using it, and Naofumi gets really bad pains in his stomach and his biceps. He says that it would have been a lot worse if he kept using it the entire time, but luckily he didn't have to. The other 3 heroes are in complete and utter shock, staring at Naofumi. What kind of monster is he? He was supposed to be some lame-o, someone that only cooks. That's it. But now he's fighting off monsters like that? Like Glass? The woman that came down and one-shot a Soul Eater that they couldn't even defeat? They are at a loss for words. Motoyasu is obviously in his own head, thinking that that was just a fluke of some sorts. But what will Naofumi pull out of his bag next? What will Naofumi have cooking in the kitchen next time on the finale of What If Naofumi Was the Legendary Cooking Hero? If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, sub, and comment down below any suggestions. And I hope you all enjoyed this video, because I did definitely. It was really, really fun to make, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.